the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
So let me introduce to you Father Carter Griffin. He is a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington and the rector of St. John Paul II Seminary. He converted to Catholicism while attending Princeton University, and after serving 4 years as a naval officer, entered the seminary and was ordained to the priesthood in 2004. Father Griffin, let's dive into the first pillar, which is the human formation. And in that section, you've got 5 virtues that you've singled out of the, I don't know how many virtues there are, but dozens and dozens. But you've got order, sincerity, chastity, fortitude, and magnanimity. Why did you select those 4 of the entire array of virtues that are out there?
Well, I mean, I guess there were a couple criteria that I used. One of them is a virtue that might cover a lot of ground. For example, fortitude is something that it's, every virtue needs fortitude in a certain way, because you need some fortitude to overcome whatever tendencies we have that are opposed to that virtue. Yeah. Chastity, covers so much ground. It's not just kind of pornography, but it's also, how we interact with people of the opposite sex, and how we, whether we are modest and respectful of others. And anyway, so the point is something that's a little more. But then together with that, sort of thinking like, what are the virtues that I have found in my own work forming young people, young men, that have been most decisive and sort of most bang for the buck, so to speak. And, for example, like starting with order, order sounds like, well, okay, he's sort of a neat freak or something like that. But in fact, order is really at the essence of this whole project, right? If we're disordered inside, if we don't have order, and we have to have practical ways of living order, even physical order around us, or, order, but above all, order in our use of time. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're never going to grow in a prayer life if you don't know how to manage your time, for example, or whatever it might be. So that was one that I saw as, even though it sounds kind of innocuous, kind of starting out talking about, whatever, making your bed. It's Admiral McRaven's thing, if you want to change the world, make your bed, right? And
exactly.
There's a lot of wisdom in that.
I told my sons, listen, here's the reason why I want you to make your bed. I want you to make your bed because you don't want to. And that's the reason. It's not because I love a well-made bed. I don't. But I don't like making mine either. But you start your day off with a little piece of discipline, a little piece of going against the grain, and it kind of sets you up to accomplish better things during the day.
Exactly, yeah. And also, there's an aesthetic quality. There's something about having an ordered desk or an ordered bed or an ordered whatever. Yeah. Like it does contribute to sort of an internal ordering in us, So anyway, that was kind of the reason for starting with order. And, the second one is sincerity, which is, if you were to ask me, like, if you could have one thing in a seminary to make it a good formation environment, I would instantly say sincerity.
Is that right?
Even more than all these other virtues, because with sincerity, that's like the key that unlocks all formation, right? If somebody's not sincere, there's just, okay, well, what's the point? You're not going to get anywhere. And so whatever parents can do, and it can be challenging, but for parents to create an environment where kids can really feel like they can say anything, I think that's just so important. I've just seen so much growth in freedom when people feel that you love them, that you care for them, and that even if it means something difficult will happen, they have to be punished, in the case of a family, or in the case of a seminary, somebody might have to leave the seminary. They still know that it's better to live in the truth. And I tell parents they have to develop a confessor's face. I mentioned earlier they don't have to learn how to hear confessions, but they kind of do, because the key thing is, like, no matter, it's for a young priest, no matter what they tell you, you cannot reveal any shock at all. It's like, oh yeah, I hear this all the time. It's like perfectly normal day here. Because otherwise they're not going to, people are not. So you have to learn how to, and parents need to do that sometimes, no matter what your child is saying. Like, it's okay. Like, I had an old spiritual director who used to have as a mantra, like, the truth is never a problem. It's like, we can work with anything as long as it's true. And anyway, those are kind of the first two.
And I think, an orientation I wish that I had early, that I developed a little bit later, but was when the kid messes up and gets into trouble, that's a good thing, because now I've got an opportunity to teach something, right? Now we have an opportunity to form them in some virtue that was lacking. And, as a younger parent, I would give in to anger, and I'd be like, and get all crazy. And as I got older and matured and became a better father, kind of like, all right, well, let's figure out why you decided this was a good idea. Let's talk about this. And I think that the later children found it a little bit easier, I think, to be sincere and open, at least with me. Now, their mother did it well right from the beginning, but I'm a slower study. But I think that feeling that the kids can come and talk to you about anything, and that they are loved unconditionally is so critical. Right? That's the idea.
Yeah, and I would say loved and also liked. Like there's something kids know when you kind of enjoy spending time with them. And let's face it, we don't always enjoy spending time with them. But the fact is that, hopefully that that parents can just enjoy being in their children's company, and the kids will pick up on that like osmosis.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's one thing you mentioned earlier about let's think of the vision. Like, this is the kind of man I want you to be when you're 25, and this is incompatible with that. That's a great example of how the correction can be something that is not just about that moment, but lifts their eyes to something beyond it. So you can say that this is why I'm disciplining you right now, not because I'm sort of, I enjoy doing this. In fact, I don't.
Right.
But I love you too much not to do this. And this is why, because I want you to be this kind of a man one day, or this kind of a woman one day.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I spent, this therapy thing is my second career. Radio is actually my third career now, but I spent 36 years in the corporate world running human resource departments. And, and so I know what kinds of employees don't make it and aren't successful, right? And so it's a little bit easier to kind of form virtue in the kids, because it's kind of like, if you don't develop order, for instance, or sincerity or any of these things, you're just not going to be successful in the world, much less, get to heaven. It's just, you're just going to be unemployed a lot, because, people who are orderly are more successful than people who are disorderly. That's just how that goes. So, yeah. All right. Order and sincerity. Okay. Check. I'm on board with both of those. Now, chastity. Talk about that.
Chastity, yeah. So this is obviously a huge conversation, but just very briefly, I would say that we live in a time where there's a lot of confusion about chastity and about the role of chastity as something sort of suffocating and restrictive and kind of life deadening, when in fact it's precisely the opposite. It's like one of the great moves that the evil one has done is turning virtue into vice and vice into virtue. That chastity, which is the thing that truly frees us to actually love well and to love with joy and to have a flourishing life, is the very thing that is accused of sort of diminishing that. And the very thing that hurts that the most, the kind of the licentious culture and the pornography and all that sort of stuff, is actually the thing that deadens the heart and deadens the mind. And, so there are a lot of kind of unwilling or perhaps willing slaves out there that need to be freed. And I'm convinced that there's a as I got into the chapter, and then I did this latest book, is obviously the whole thing is on that, which is kind of the different natural and supernatural ways of growing in chastity. But it's just so important. And I think, once again, sincerity, this is where they kind of you see the integration, because children are going to be much more likely to grow up with the virtue of chastity if they've learned to trust that that they can tell their parents anything, and that the parents will receive it with calmness and without, and that the parents themselves are able to, the idea of chastity. I just did an article in the Register a few weeks ago about to help parents with chastity. But the thing is, teaching chastity, and it's really not like the big conversation. Like, that's not how we should envision this. Right. It's like a whole bunch of small conversations that are very deliberate, but also very short and kind of casual, so that it becomes just something that we talk about. And it's not that big a deal. And then you go to that friend's house and the older brother shows you whatever, and you come back and you're like, I got to go talk to mom and dad about that,
Yeah.
It just becomes very natural. So I think that's the goal with chastity, with raising kids, is creating that environment. And that's not easy to do.
No, especially in our society. And, the Canavox folks do a wonderful job.
So great.
Of providing really great material for parents. And because I think it starts literally like when you're 4 years old, right? And
absolutely,
it's just respect for the body, right? And we have different bodies, and we treat our bodies with respect, and they're gifts from God, and then it grows from that. And I think, and chastity has a really valuable, powerful role to play in marriage, right? So a chaste marriage is a beautiful thing and one that bestows a lot of joy on the couple. Yeah. And the problem is there's a lot of influences out there that kind of disagree with that, right? That think, well, once you're married, then the sky's the limit. And and then we tend to objectify each other, right? And we tend to use each other for our selfish pleasures, and the whole thing just ends in disaster. And spend a lot of time working with couples who have lost the beauty of chaste love, even in marriage.
Right. Yeah, and I think in addition to that, like the chastity will actually promote a more comfortable physicality between the parents in front of the children.
Yes.
Right. I mean, the children really need to see the parents' their physical love for each other.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, it's just going to be hindered if the parents are basically using each other, sexually. And so to have that freedom where you could just sort of with a great deal of modesty and sort of simple joy and just showing your physical love for each other, boy, that's gold, for a child to see that. And what a contrast to what, the older brother of his friend just showed about.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that my wife and I discovered, if we would give each other a hug in the kitchen, one of the kids would discover it and come running in and be part of the hug, and then another kid would show up, and pretty soon you're tipping over, and because all the kids, they got this group hug going on, and it's a beautiful way to show love in the family. And then what we found, so we had a period a couple years ago where we were actually empty nesters for about 2 months, and then 4 of them moved back in at the same time. But for 2 months, it was just the 2 of us. And what we found was, if we still hugged in the kitchen, the dog came and jumped in the middle of us. The dog wanted to be part of the hug. So hugs are kind of contagious. So there you go. All right. So fortitude. Let's move on to fortitude.
Well, the main thing I would want to say about fortitude, just because we don't have a lot of time, but I would say that, parents love their children, and the last thing parents want to see is their children suffer. And I totally get that. But you have to mortify that.
Yeah, yes.
Right? I mean, children need to suffer a little bit. They need to go out there and make mistakes. They need to fall down. They need to not have, the bubble protective, around them, every time they walk outside. Yeah. That you have to take some risks, and that's scary, especially if you're plugged into 24/7 news and you just imagine everyone is out there to kind of, So that sort of fear gets transmitted to the kids, and then the kids grow up afraid of the world, and sort of the bulldozer thing, bulldozer parents, like clearing all the obstacles. And that actually creates children who have tremendous anxieties and lack of, and sort of insecurities.
100%.
And it's the opposite of what the parents want. But it's like somehow developing this kind of, the fortitude on the part of the parents, first of all, in order to let their children make some of those mistakes.
It's so critical, yeah. And I think, that's why I'm a big fan, and then I realize it doesn't work for everybody, but I'm a big fan of having your children play sports, because you fail a lot, especially baseball, right? Especially baseball, because the best guys get on base 1 out of 3 times. You know what I mean? And so you're going to fail a lot. And what are you going to do? You're just going to quit, or you're going to just, grab your glove, get back out there and, get back at it. And it's so, resilience, I think, is the thing. Back when I was in the corporate world, resilience was the thing that made the difference between the winners and the losers. And, we all messed up from time to time, but the winners bounced back and said, all right, well, I learned that lesson, I'm not doing that again, and I'm going to go do something different. And they ended up having a lot of career success. And the people without resilience, they just kind of folded in on themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think sometimes that can also be, the resilience kind of, because that's sort of a long-term thing. It's not the fortitude of the moment. It's the fortitude of kind of what, long patience, or the kind of the long waiting, and that might be more like in the area of doing chores, doing things to get difficult things together as a family, just ways of sort of building in this kind of like, we're just going to stick with this until we get over it, and we're going to make mistakes, or we're going to fall back. I think just giving correction, right, frankly, to children. I mean, there are a lot of children who are growing up without a lot of correction from parents, not because parents don't love them, but because they sort of feel like this might hurt their child's feelings or something. And, it really is important that kids are like, oh, yeah, okay, I get, I got corrected all the time by but they did it lovingly. I knew why they were doing it, but I so when this sort of the two that come to the seminary, oftentimes those who for the first time are receiving correction, and it's tough, when that's the first time. And they're often really good kids. Obviously, they come to the seminary, so it's
Sure.
going to be it's going to be usually the kid that never got into trouble kind of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's I think that's another area of fortitude.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about my son who was just ordained a year ago, but I probably in high school he got into more trouble than most of his brothers.
Good for him.
He was a spirited kid for sure, and I'm learning more about it now. A lot of things I didn't know about at the time. And now I'm
so he was just smarter than the other kids.
He was. He got away with stuff that I didn't know about.
That was the Best of the Week on Relevant Radio. The best way to listen to the Best of the Week is on the Relevant Radio app, free and always free. Download and share the #1 free Catholic app today in the App Store.